Yeah, hey guys, sorry there is a part three. I don't know why it wouldn't let me go to the next slide. I'm sure there was more slides than this, but for whatever reason it wouldn't let me click. So I'm going to finish it up here. We only got a few to go. So the settlement in Paris, the Treaty of Versailles, really France, Great Britain, and the United States, of course, are going to lead the charge. There's a lot of people that want a lot of things when this is done. There's a lot of things that are at stake during this time, and the United States sends their president over, Woodrow Wilson. The French send David Lloyd George. The Brits send David Lloyd George. The French send Clemenceau. The Russians, I don't know if the Russians did or not. Um, and Woodrow Wilson brings what he calls his 14 points. Says there's 14 things that need to happen in this whole settlement issue, and here they are. And we're going to take a look at these a little closer. But it's very unfavorable to the Central Powers because they believe it's their fault and they should pay for it. And there's a lot of people who are pretty mad about it, and they're going to take a beating in the settlement. So his 14 points. Number one, no secret deals. They were pretty mad. The Allies were pretty mad that Russia set a deal up with Germany so they could stop fighting on the Eastern Front while Russia was going through the revolution, which means Germany can send all of their troops to the Western Front and fight against the French, Brits, and eventually the Americans. They were pretty mad about that. Wilson says you also need free trade on the seas, equal trade conditions. Everybody should be able to trade with anybody they want, anytime they want. All nations have to decrease armaments so we don't have this buildup again. An adjustment of colonial claims, basically, in other words, Germany loses all of their overseas colonies, all of them, which means a few islands in the Pacific, a couple things in the Caribbean, and 3 colonies in Africa, which included Tanzania, Namibia, and Cameroon. All the Central Powers have to bail out of any Russian territory, and they will define its own independence. Belgium is evacuated and restored. Alsace-Lorraine goes back to all French territory. That was the big one for France. That was their number one. You're going to readjust the Italian borders. There's a chunk of northern Italy that went back to Italy from way back when. Austria and Hungary are provided opportunity for self-determination. Nobody's going to force them what sort of government to have. What they are going to force is their um, ability to determine for themselves whatever they want. So they're going to redraw the Balkan region, which is southeastern Europe. Romania gets to be a country, Bulgaria, but then they do something really stupid and they push all of these other Balkan countries, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, they're going to mush them all together in one big country and call it Yugoslavia, which is a huge mistake. And there's nothing but fighting there all the way up until the 90s, and then bloody battle after bloody battle, until eventually these countries get independence, and they're still pretty screwed up today. Turkish state, the Ottoman Empire is over. So you create a new Turkish state, and one military leader from Turkey is going to take up that charge. Mustafa Kemal is going to take that up and create the Republic of Turkey by 1924. You're going to create a new Polish state. Poland hasn't been Poland in a long time. There's Poles that want their own country, so they're going to get it. And then you're going to create this League of Nations, a means by which these countries can come together and work these issues out before they start shooting at each other. Uh, and uh, and that's going to be around all the way up through the 1930s, the League of Nations. So territory changes. You can see a few things. Romania becomes a country. Here's that big dumb Yugoslavia country. It's like I don't know why they thought that was going to work. Let's take 8 different ethnic groups, mush them together, make the Serbians in charge, and think everybody's just going to be okay with it. You get this new country, Czechoslovakia, which was always a little problematic because you have Slovaks over here, which are Slavic people, and then Czechs over here, which are Germanic people. But they agreed to have one big fat country together. And when they decided to split up in the 90s, it was actually pretty amicable. Austria gets its own thing. Hungary gets its own thing. And Alsace-Lorraine goes back, and then you get some new countries out here in this territory ceded by the Germans after the war. So the Ottoman Empire is over. They get out of all the Balkans and European occupation all the way down into Anatolia. Eventually, they're going to rise up with Mustafa Kemal, and they're going to get their own Republic of Turkey by I guess it's 23, not 24. But he says we got to have a secular government. We don't want Islam running the government. Islam is Islam, and that's great. But is the church and the government should be separate. They don't need to be the same thing. And one of the big things Turkey did, and you see is very evident even today, is say emancipation of women, but really it was guaranteeing civil rights and the ability for women to be a part of society at large. And some countries don't allow that. You go to Turkey, and it's a Muslim country, but it's very different. I was at a mosque in Turkey, and there was a few women just standing outside the mosque wearing t-shirts and blue jeans, no head covers, just chilling, sipping coffee. Very, very different than a lot of other places around the world, Islamic countries around the world. So some territorial changes down here after the war. You can see what's going on here. We see a lot of this territory that was Ottoman down through here now becomes the property of France and or England. France got Syria and Lebanon. England got Mesopotamia. Today we call it Iraq. And then Saudi quickly became the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, not too far off. Bahrain goes to the Brits, all this stuff down through here. And Jordan becomes Brit territory, Transjordan, and then Palestine. And then they're going to screw Palestine up something terrible, but that's a topic for another day. But then this League of Nations is formed, and these countries adopt it. A whole bunch of countries decide to join the League of Nations, and it seems to be a pretty good idea, and it's going to be effective. They want this idea of self-determination, right? What is Austria going to be? They've had an emperor for how many ever 100 years since really the end of the Holy Roman Empire, right? But what does that look like for them? What are they going to have? What kind of government are they going to have? Well, it's up to them to decide. We're not going to force anything in. If they want to have a king, they're going to have a king. It's up to them, which is pretty cool. Nobody's going to force them to do anything. And you want to be able to control these formerly colonized areas and guarantee some self-determination, at least as much as possible. However, the United States did not join the League of Nations. It was what's his name, Wilson's idea, but the United States still didn't join, and all because it was Republican-controlled Congress, and President Wilson was a Democrat, and they just didn't like him, and they didn't want to get into a treaty with a whole bunch of countries and be entangled in something like that. And so they just didn't let him have it, and it really tore him up that he wasn't able to fulfill this dream of creating this thing and being a part of it. And he traveled around the country trying to sell this to the country and getting Congress to change their mind, and it killed him. He had a stroke, and shortly after he's done as president, he died because of that. So some challenges, of course, diminished economic stature. Europe's, not going to be as big on the world stage, of course, as they were before the war, and economic relationship with the United States is a little bit different. United States gains a little bit more world status, and a lot of overseas investments and markets are gone because of that. And of course, through these ideas, the self-determination, these countries like France and England are spewing self-determination, but yet all over Africa and Asia, there's, these colonies. How come we don't get self-determination? Why are you here? You're selling this to the rest of the world that Austria should have self-determination, but what about Uganda? Why don't we have it? And so these revolutionary ideas are coming to the colonies. And so, hasten the coming of the war, and who was involved? Well, the shooting of Archduke certainly was, and the rivalries and the nationalism, political climate at the brink of the war. These countries hated each other, and they were just looking for an excuse to go after each other. Huge military buildup. Germany builds up theirs, so as a reaction, France has to build up theirs, and then as France builds theirs up too much, then Germany's got to counter with it. And then Russia freaks out because they're on the border. So then Austria-Hungary goes and builds theirs up, and Russia's got to do theirs twice because they got Russia and blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, you got these huge armaments, and now these countries got to do something with it. And they're ready to go. Some concerns both sides. Well, how do you supply this war? And Germany's got to fight a two-front war. And just some of them other things. And new technologies, planes, tanks, submarines, gas, barbed wire, machine guns, you name it. And then the Paris settlement. Germany's going to get punished. Austria's going to get punished big time. They got to pay a lot of money back and clean things up. And a lot of these countries get to be countries again with a little bit of self-determination. And we're going to see how all that came out in the next chapter. So that's it for part 3, I guess. Sorry about the goof up. But we'll see you all in the next one. Later.